Did you know that the Carrier Gas Furnace Factory in Indianapolis also has a recently updated technical training facility? Follow along to learn more about the My Learning Center. So we're spending some time at the Carrier Technical Training Facility here in Indianapolis, and I have to say this is an absolutely amazing technical training facility. It's a wonderful manufacturing plant that is right next door, but the technical training has went through a complete revamp, a total new redesign. We have gorgeous equipment everywhere, and we've got 4,000 square feet of technical training as well as modern classrooms upstairs. So we're going to spend some time showing you all the different training that is available here at Carrier, and I would like the team to introduce themselves and talk about this program.
So my name's Jeffrey Howard. I am the Technical Training Center Manager.
I'm Joel Crabtree. I am the residential ducted trainer.
And then my name is Derek Mong. I am the technical trainer for ductless and VRF.
And Derek, let's go ahead and start since we got the mic down there. So tell me about the training classes that you offer here for that.
So when it comes to the ductless class, we have a foundation class, and then we also have an advanced class. When we talk about our VRF, we have a foundation class for both our 2-pipe and then our 3-pipe, so Toshiba Carrier lines.
Very, very cool.
So on my side of things, we have a foundations. We have advanced. With advanced, we do a deep dive into components and diagnostic on our communicating equipment. And then we have our symposium series, just a step further, where we go into theory and psychrometrics and things of that nature.
All right, so tell us a little bit about the whole program and the different training classes that we have available here.
Yep. So as Derek and Joel mentioned, we have those foundational level training courses that we build upon.
Sure, those stacking blocks.
Absolutely. And then from there, go into our advanced where we can dive into those components. So understand the installation, understand how the system should be commissioned or started up from that aspect all the way through. Now let's dive into the components, dive into each piece, how to properly diagnose them in the field, right?
Right.
We want you to diagnose it right the first time and replace it just once.
Now, are the classes available to Carrier dealers only, or are they available to others outside of the organization?
So through My Learning Center, we do have a bunch of online training that anybody just needs. They can go to My Learning Center, mlctraining.com.
Okay.
And from there, they can put in their email. They can sign up for an account. Other than that, we do have our Carrier distributors, dealers that come through our training, and that's how they would sign up.
You bet. We have a lot of educators that are looking for continuing training on new technologies in particular. Most educators like myself, we come out of the field and we get decent at teaching, and then we sometimes forget that technology changed while we were learning to become educators. And so it's always important that we provide those resources for educators to be able to keep up with the technology. So that's fantastic that we have the opportunity for not just Carrier dealers, but technicians and educators to also participate in training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. We are very grateful to be able to join Carrier at their Indianapolis gas furnace manufacturing facility and to experience their My Learning Center. We encourage you to learn more at mlctraining.com. And to stay up to date with the ESCO Roadshow, follow us at escogroup.org. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. So today we are very honored to spend some time with my new friend, Jeff Howard from Carrier. Jeff, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you, Clifton?
I'm doing great, spending one more class time here out of the barn dominium, and then I'll be in the new location back in the studio, and really looking forward to that. And everyone, let us know where you're joining in from. We'd love to know how large our community continues to grow. We have technicians that join us from all over the world. Kendrick up in Chicago. Kendrick is here almost every week learning how to be a better instructor. Todd joining us. Todd is hanging out in the background as well. So if questions come through that need answered, Todd's going to be around to help us, navigate through any additional resources. We've got a few things that we're going to be discussing today. I've actually got links to some of the Carrier handouts in PDF form. We got some QRs towards the end of the class. We want to make sure that you have everything that you need to be prepared for, I would say, a mild transition that we have gone through. It's it's been a learning curve for everyone, and we are half a year into our A2L transition. Katie, thanks for joining us over in Hillsboro, Missouri. A lot of crazy weather over in Missouri. About an hour or so north or south of where Katie is from, over at Jefferson College. Osvaldo joining us from Belize again. Osvaldo is a technician, Jeff, from Belize, South America. Joins us every week, learning how to
That is
be a
awesome.
better technician. It is. It's just absolutely wonderful to have him joining us. Hey, Kelsey's joining us from Indianapolis. We've got Henry, Illinois. So we'll have a variety of people that join us. Some will stay the whole time. Some will come and go depending on their day. But a lot of people have been calling ESCO because we do a lot of classes on A2L. Jason Martin wrote the low GWP safety course, which we still get a lot of traction with. But then we also get a lot of installation questions, right? And even though we go over them over and over and over, it sometimes we I guess we just kind of lose focus of what A2Ls are and the things that we need to be paying attention to, because there are some things that are same. There's some things that are different, and understanding that really comes down to having the right resources. So when we think about resources for training and education, as an industry, we rely on our manufacturers like Carrier, to make sure that we're getting the instructions that came from sometimes years of research to get prepared for these transitions. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time diving into A2L installation and design practices from a manufacturer. So, Jeff, I've got the presentation loaded in. If you hover over the screen, you'll be able to navigate through there. But let's start out a little bit and help everyone get to know you and understand your role in the Carrier training side.
Yeah. So as you said, my name's Jeffrey Howard, or Jeff Howard here. I've been with Carrier for going on 2.5 to 3 years. I've been in the industry though for well over 20. I started out doing everything from new constructions to installs to working in a warehouse, pulling and getting familiar with the equipment, doing rough-ins, all of that, right? And then as I was doing that while in school, well, I love working with my hands. So how can I make this a career?
Build
And
it.
I
Yep.
chose to do it, right? So from there, moved into service, and then the last 12 years or so, I was in building science, basically
Ooh.
out in the field. So doing a lot of training and teaching
Yep.
within a rather large organization that I was with, traveling amongst a few states, and then got the opportunity here to join Carrier as a trainer. So I started out as a residential ducted trainer within Carrier, and then moved into the training center manager role once our previous manager moved on to a different role within Carrier as well. So
I was highlighting at the beginning the intro into the show, and I encourage everyone to go check out the other videos that we did of the training center. We were invited to come to Carrier as one of the first non-Carrier groups to get a visit of behind the scenes to show what the factory looks like, and particularly to spend time in the new technical training center. And it's I don't even, it's hard to compare your training center. If you think about a state of the art building, like you're going to go into a modern architectural law office, but yet you walk in and it's packed to the hilt full of every type of HVAC equipment. That's really what you're experiencing there at your training facility in Indianapolis.
yeah, when it was designed and when it was first built, it was really well thought out. I mean, we have 6 labs on our main level, and amongst those we have again a couple VRF labs. We have our ductless, our crossover, and of course a few of our ducted labs as well. So we utilize every single inch of space that we can, and we try to incorporate as many pieces or many different systems that we have as well.
Sure, and it's very much focused on A2L equipment. That's one of the things that I found when I went there is how much emphasis was on A2L, and so that was the discussion today. We're going to help answer a lot of questions we get, not just from educators, but from contractors and technicians. They'll call us asking about A2L specifics. So we grabbed a few of those ones that were the highlights, and we thought we would spend a little bit of time today going through those and then talk about some of these highlights. And if you feel like there's any of these that we need to spend more time on, let us know. We're here for you. We are here every week to educate you on the things that you need to be successful, whether you're an engineer, a educator, a trainer, a contractor, technician. The goal is to make sure that you have all of the resources. So we're going to talk about things like Puron Advance today. We're going to talk about installations and reusing existing line sets. That's probably the number one question that we get from our callers. We'll talk about some of the brazing and mechanical fittings that can be used. We'll talk about traps, accessories, and then we'll get into some additional training and resources that are available to everyone. So a lot of content for us today. I love this because it's like, where are we going? Well, let's talk about where we came from.
Yeah, absolutely. And we felt that that was very, very helpful for individuals that are either new into our field or just a refresher that have been in our industry for a while, right? Um, with that, I like to always go back to, actually, I'll take a step back. One
Okay.
of my colleagues and very good friends here at Carrier, one of his sayings he said to me when I first joined the team, and we were talking about going and training some of our dealers across the country about the A2Ls and the transition that we're going to have, right, to Puron
Yeah.
Advance, is his statement that stood. It's been with me ever since, right? And every time that I start to talk about this is not a revolution; it's an evolution.
Perfect.
So it's not a revolution; it's an evolution, right?
That's
We
all.
always want to get better. The search for the ideal refrigeration or the refrigerant has been happening since the dawn of time of mechanical refrigeration.
You bet. Absolutely.
So what we're looking at is kind of like a sine wave, right? That we have on the screen here. And does a sine wave have an ending? Does it have a beginning? Well, we're always going to search. So no matter where we came from to where we're going, we're going to continue to do that, right? Because we want to be responsible for what we can be responsible for.
Yep.
And how we like to say that is, how can we help? Well, if we look back in the 50s, we had R22. Now with R22, we had a high GWP and a low or no ODP.
So
What
GWP
was
for
happening?
global warming potential, ODP for
Yes.
ozone depleting potential. For those of you, if you're joining and are not familiar with the terms, we'll be using those.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you, Clifton.
Sure.
So what is ODP, right? Well, ozone layer getting thinner and thinner. So as we get better technology and we get to study the Earth and other things more, we realize that maybe the ozone is not staying as it should, and we're seeing the shift where it is getting thinner. So again, how can we help? Well, let's get to the point where we can actually start to lower that ODP or that ozone depletion potential, and that's where we transition in the 90s to R410A or Puron. Now, with that, right, we still had to look at our ODP and our GWP. The GWP is still a little bit higher than where we would want it to be, but again, the ODP that we had, the ozone depletion potential, was going down. So no ODP, high GWP. As we continue to monitor or look at the ozone or the atmosphere, what happened over the last 30 years. I think I just recently read a study that said that, hey, it's starting to heal itself. Now, is it cyclical? Is it not? But hey,
Right.
it's starting to heal itself. So I like to say congratulations. Good
Yeah,
job.
exactly.
We've all done our part.
Yep.
Right.
One step closer.
So that being said, now what we're seeing the GWP concerns. So that's where we're trapping more heat within the atmosphere. So again, as an industry, as a carrier, we say, how can we help? And
Right.
with that, let's look at that AIM Act that was passed, right? Now we got to figure out how we get that lower GWP.
And
that
it's a
was what we
significant
transitioned to.
schedule.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. It's been a little while since we brought it up on Did You Know? A lot of people don't realize that it's not like we just hit this phase down, right? We started this phase down when we started looking at our baselines in the early 2020s, and then we made a first step in January of 2022. Most people don't realize that this entire refrigerant transition that we are now seeing 4 years later actually began its path in 2022. It's Been around a
Yeah,
while.
and we've been testing, you know, a lot longer than that with Puron Advance. So it's not like we're coming up to it. Let's go ahead and just switch over to our Puron Advance, the R454B. There's
Right.
been plenty of years of testing and studies by our engineering team that have taken careful looks at all different types of what can we do, right? So yes, it's first was in 2022, and now as we entered 2025, we had that other reduction which dropped us down. And that current GWP level is 700, right? So again, we chose R454B as our refrigerant because what do people in our industry not like? One of the
Change.
biggest things is change, right? And I think you and I have had that conversation as well. Change is difficult for us all. We get it.
Right.
So with 454B for us, it's hey, what can we do to not have an immediate change again if the AMAC continues to go here? As we see in 2029, there's that other reduction, which is going to be a total of 70% reduction. So that's going to drop down to about 500 at that point as it stands today. And our R454B, our Puron Advance, is actually below even that next threshold, that next drop down.
Yeah, we're going to see some interesting transitions as we move forward in refrigerant regulations. And that's why we feel that it is so important for people to understand the importance of these transitions. We continuously hear, we continuously see the post on social media, oh, we're doing it because it's time for a new refrigerant. It has nothing to do with that, right? It's time for a healthier, safer refrigerant as much as we can without disrupting the industry as much as possible. And so in doing that, our manufacturers are really putting a lot of research and design into finding these solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, several engineers that I work with and chemists here within Carrier, they have everybody in our industry in mind. How can we continue to make that as easy as possible by following these different regulations and things that are occurring?
You bet. So within that, we have two different refrigerants that we've seen. We've seen an R32, we've seen an R454B, and they're quite different particularly in their GWP. And I think the question that we get a lot on this is, well, why did we end up with two refrigerants?
Yeah, and really, it's hey, we're not going to just from the testing, you get to kind of choose as a manufacturer what refrigerant you want. You just have to follow
Right.
these regulations by the AMAC. It's got to be below a certain level, and as long as you're below that, the manufacturers can choose what they want. And us coming out with the R454B and a couple other manufacturers following suit. Why does it make sense to go from one to the other? It's up to the manufacturer what they seem best for their business and their and what they do.
And what I've seen from doing our behind the scenes videos, excuse me, we've seen a lot of the equipment. Um, and many a times, if a manufacturer was going to be making a transition into R32 products, they had to do a lot of design and retooling. And it was a very, very heavy lift, especially for products that were already proven um, their value in the industry. And what Puron Advance was able to do was allow minimal transition. And so even from the technician side, we're seeing a lot of technicians feeling very comfortable with our 454B Puron Advance because it looks and feels very similar than what they have with R410A. The equipment didn't change significantly. Sometimes minor revisions in model numbers could suffice.
Yeah, being around during the transition from R22 to R410A,
Whew, big difference.
that it was crazy, right? Hey, we're going to go 2, 3, 4 times the amount of pressure that we had with our R22 systems. How are we going to be able to handle that and work with that, right? It all came down to the training that we had to have at that point. We feel the same, obviously, now with our A2L refrigerants. We still have to have that proper training for. I saw, you had posted there, right? The phase down effect is affecting all of us. We've got to have to, or we have to be able to handle the refrigerant properly. We have to understand um, what we're using, when we're using it, where we're using it, and how we can take care of dissipating any sort of potential leaks and have that leak prevention, as you mentioned. One of the things when I first started the industry was we had to write down the refrigerant that we used because, again, going from R22 to R410A, before I could get a new jug, I had to write it down
Yeah.
and know where I utilized it. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's best practice to do that. So,
It is.
and I don't know many people that I've spoken with that actually continued doing that after my first job that I had in the industry.
Yeah, we're starting to see some change in that. So we work with companies like FM Hero and our reclamation companies like Hudson, and we're starting to see a lot more emphasis put on labeling refrigerants and understanding the refrigerants. Because if we go back and we look at that entire phase down, the main reason we're going through a phase down is we let it out to begin with. If we could have kept the refrigerants in the systems and not in the atmosphere, we wouldn't have had um, the high level of transition that we've seen with refrigerants, and it'll continue that way if we're good stewards of the refrigerants that we have now, like Puron Advanced. We can extend our service gas life expectancy out as long as we possibly can by doing better practices. And so it's important for everyone to understand going forward that refrigerants is just a matter of understanding what they're made out of, how do we handle them, and what's the best applications, and continue doing business as normal.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And as you mentioned, with the different refrigerants, R32, R454B, a lot of people are like, well, what's in R454B? Because we also got a lot of questions initially as we were doing our training leading up to the transition year of 2025. It's flammable, it's flammable, it's flammable. It's got propane in it. Hold on.
I just had one today, literally.
Did you? Yeah.
I had a
We
conversation
still
with a guy, a trainer that was doing a class, and he said, "You'll never believe what I just heard in my class today from a contractor. He asked me if there was propane in R454B," and I'm like, "You're still getting those questions."
Yeah, we hear it, and one of the big things is, again, educate, letting people know, no, there's no propane. Propane actually has a refrigerant classification, and that classification is R290. As we can see here on the screen, I don't see R290.
Nope.
So with our 454B, it does have about 69.9% of R32 and 31.1 of R1234YF.
Engineered ratios, not a mixture. For everyone to know that there's a lot of science that goes into making them work together. This is not something you can go out and create yourself. It is a engineered refrigerant for a very specific refrigerant. We had some of those questions and concerns a while back too, and hopefully those have all faded away. We're not getting very many of those anymore.
Yeah. And then with the classification that we have here, ASHRAE's had their 1, 2, 3 scale here since 1939. And then eventually we added in the A's and the B's for non-toxic versus toxic, which kind of leaves us here with our A1, A2, A3. And then with, of course, looking at the R454B, 32, with the A2Ls, well, that was a testing done by chemists and everything as well, looking at the chamber of where they tried to ignite it. And they noticed that on their scale, it was just barely outside of that A1.
So
barely.
Borderline.
Yes. But it's outside, right? So
Yeah.
there's no...
It was a standard.
Yep, exactly. So it's outside. So, hey, look, it's an A2, but it's low on that A2. So
right.
Created a classification of A2L, and I think that was sometime around 2019.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize how close that line is. Like, if we could have been able to convince the ASHRAE chairs to fudge the width of that line just a little bit, let's just make that little bar a tad bit wider, and it'll still be an A1. Would have made this whole transition a lot easier. But we're keeping a standard for a very specific reason. If you go past this, you are now in a new classification. Doesn't mean you're way into this new classification. It means you just barely made it, and that's really what happened.
Yeah, and with our Puron Advance and comparing it to Puron, we're looking at roughly, it's, again, we talk about change, right? So that pressure that we're used to seeing with Puron, well, with Puron Advance, it's roughly within about 7%.
Yeah.
So it's not far off. And if you look at that on your gauges, so let's look at our pressure on our gauges. It's anywhere between 10 to 40, 20, 10 to 50 psi on your scales.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very similar. It's not a significant transition for people. Where people get hung up are on the things like installation, like the basic questions. Can I utilize an existing refrigerant line set? And that's a great question, but we are still getting lots and lots and lots of these.
Yeah, absolutely. We are as well. So can you reuse an existing line set? The answer is yes, right? You absolutely can. So if it is the correct size for your application that we're installing it in, and then also if as long as you dehydrate or clean out the line as well. So as long as you purge the lines, you clean the lines, and then of course we'll talk about evacuation and things like that too. That's very, very important. So yes, you can reuse the existing line set as long as of course there's no kinks or tears or breaks or anything inside of on those lines. And we again maintain them, we take care of them, we clean them.
And a good reference point for everyone, if you're looking for information like where does this come from, we go right into things like this, like the long line set installation specifications. You can look in the standard installation manual for your outdoor unit and your coil, your match coil that you're using, and you'll find a lot of the same specifications. But you'll actually be able to determine, is my line set allowable for this size? I'll put some links here in a little while so that you can come back to this PDF. I use it whenever I get the questions like these that we're answering today. That's usually where I begin in my long line set installation instructions, because it has a lot of this information all in one place. So fantastic resource there.
And not just the long line application, as we may get some questions and talk about as well, but we also have our residential air conditioners and heat pumps using Puron Advance guideline. So it's an application guideline and a service manual. So it's an additional resource that I highly, highly recommend, because there's a lot of good content in there. It talks about, not just can I reuse lines. It talks about what do we do if we have to do this repair or that repair. Troubleshooting with superheat. So again, there's a lot of good information that we have out there and some guidelines that we really want to help the field and help the industry, understand or answer those questions.
I'll have to look for a link for that one here in a minute, because I have not went through that one myself, and that sounds like a really good one. And Scott, no big deal. You can join anytime. If you want to catch up on any of this, you can go back later to the HVACR Learning Network, where you can watch this again. If you're needing CEUs, you can actually watch the entire episode and take a assessment afterwards to be able to gain continuing education units for this type of training. We are glad that you're joining us. And actually, I need to get back with you anyhow, because I think you sent me a message about some equipment that I need to get back. I apologize. It's been a little bit crazy around here in the last few days, but I will definitely do that. So when we talk about our line sets, then, Jeff, there's the next question that comes to us. Can we use mechanical fittings?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So with that, again, if you braze or if you're going to use any sort of mechanical fittings, you want to make sure that you're following those best practices of doing what you're supposed to with those. So you're going to follow the installation, or you're going to follow your manufacturer instructions for your press or push fitting tools. So whatever tool you have, each of them may be a little bit different, right? You want to follow those instructions on how they tell you to utilize the tools. You want to still make sure that you're taking care of the lines. So you want, hey, if I'm going to deburr the lines, when I go to cut them, we're actually using a piping cutter. We're not going to use a rigid blade or, Sawzall or anything that we may have in our vehicles and our trucks. So again, nice round cut with our piping cutters. We want to make sure that we take care of them, clean them, use anything to kind of wipe them down, keep them from getting any moisture in them. And then, of course, follow your instructions on your tools if you're going to use any press or push mechanical fittings. With the brazing aspect, it's the same thing, right? Best practices. Best practices, as a colleague and friend of mine said, that it hasn't changed in decades. Actually, we can go back to the 50s, and they were writing about what we're talking about today. So you're going to purge with nitrogen as we're brazing. You're going to keep everything nice and clean. You're going to dehydrate and evacuate the lines properly. So follow those best practices.
I love when you say dehydration because you're right. All of our original training manuals, it was always referenced as dehydration. And we still do in a lot of our educational content here at ESCO. And that process, it's very important when we look at that. It's not just pulling a vacuum on a system, we're pulling a vacuum for a purpose of dehydration. And that's a critical thing to understand is that this is all fundamental refrigeration practices that have been around for decades. When we do talk about the mechanical and the press fittings, we get a lot of questions from educators, and particularly, can I use these? Because there are a lot of times now, because of the cost of brazing rod, if anyone's purchased any brazing rod in the last 6 months, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's actually cheaper to be able to use mechanical fittings versus brazing. And many classrooms are starting to teach both methodologies. And I highly encourage you, all of our educators that are joining us, we really need to be looking at that because you made such a perfect point, Jeff. You have to know the tool well. You have to be cut and cleaned properly. If it is not done right, it's like any other process. If we miss one of those steps, it's going to be done wrong. Just like brazing. If I miss a step along the way, if I forget a spot, I'm going to have leaks. And it's the same way with our mechanical fittings. Now, there was a period of time where a lot of manufacturers didn't allow the use of mechanical fittings, but that culture is starting to change. And it comes down to, are you not letting the refrigerant out? That's all we all care about anyhow. Are we creating a clean, sealed system? So I encourage you all to look at both options if you're not already working with both brazing and our mechanical fittings.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Actually, so much so on our equipment, we went ahead and we changed our outdoor units to straight stub outs because what we were seeing the field doing as they were becoming more and more comfortable with mechanical fittings is they would cut the bell. And when you go to cut the bell reducer, it's too close to the valve body, and you can't
Absolutely.
really get your tools in there for those fittings. So they were having some issues when they were using their mechanical fittings in that regard. So with the transition to, of course, our Puron Advance, we said let's help again. How can we help? What can we do to try to make it easier for the field? Instead
Yeah.
of having the bell, you can put the bell on there if you want. So if you're going to brace, you can clean your the end of your service valve. You can swage it. You can get your bell back. Or hey, if I'm using mechanical fittings, I can go ahead and just press directly to it without trying to cut a bell off. So just one of the small things that we've done to try to help out the field in the industry of the technicians that are installing it or working on it out in the field.
I did not realize that. That's really good to know because we get a lot of comments about that because the technicians enjoy using them. Once you get to know the tool and the fittings properly, it's a fantastic application. But you're right. In many a times when I found leaks as a field service technician, when I was doing field service technical advising and diagnostics, if I would find a leak on a mechanical system, it's typically at the outdoor unit where they cut the bell off and they didn't have enough room to get a deep enough throat on their bell. So, yeah, having that longer stem is really, really, really cool thing. So, yeah, I'm glad to know that one. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Now we start getting into some additional.
Yep. So ductless crossover, we're getting a lot of our crossover line is gaining a lot of popularity. A smaller footprint on an outdoor unit. It's got an inverter. It's variable speed. That mid tier efficiency there that people are after and want. The quietness. Again, multifamily homes, tight spaces, so great application for those types of installs and things like that. So people ask, well, what about my refrigerant lines with my crossover equipment? Well, with our crossover equipment, what we have is you can actually use your regular refrigerant lines that you would have for your conventional systems. So
Okay.
you can reuse, you can replace whatever you may need to do with that. So your typical sizes will work with our crossover equipment. We wanted to make that a seamless transition as well. Ductless, of course, you'll follow what you need to on your sizing for those. So you may have to replace those. A lot of the ductless units that we see are new installs or things like that anyway. So they're replacing the line sets. with that, when we talk about the application of our crossover or our ductless is, especially ductless is, hey, do I have to have a filter dryer?
Yeah.
But with
Big
ductless,
question.
we don't have to. No. So no sight glasses, no, we don't need any of that with our ductless line. Don't need it necessarily with our crossover either, unless again being told to or recommended by someone that's assisting, our technicians out in the field, maybe a service manager or something somewhere going, hey, I want to see what's going on. We do those things, but we typically don't need those things added to our equipment.
Yeah, they're relying on maximum capacity, maximum flow, and any restriction in our line set is a restriction in capacity. It's a restriction in its capability. So we see screens in front of our metering devices, typically, our electronic expansion valves in particular. But if we think back about best practices, once again, if we would have been following best practices all along, and every technician followed best practices, we would have never needed filter dryers on residential split systems.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Again, doing the small things, but we also got to understand, right out in the field, we get busy, we're moving things, we're doing things as quickly as we can, and we want to be efficient. So, but that's at least on the repair portion. But yeah, we've really never wanted to release that refrigerant to the atmosphere.
Sure. Now, when we start talking about these, hybrid systems, where we're starting to see a lot more of, what are we seeing for refrigerant leak detection on these types of units?
As in trying to find leaks,
Are we
or the
seeing,
systems that come with them.
yeah, are we seeing refrigerant leak detections on, say, like these on the air handlers? But are they on the ductless indoor units as well?
Yeah, so everything that is manufactured does have to follow UL 207. We talk about refrigerant lines, dissipation systems, everything like that. So there is a requirement that states that if it's above 3.9 pounds of refrigerant in a system from the manufacturer, it has to have some sort of dissipation system. So um, all of our residential equipment does. It does have dissipation systems included with them. So when we go to install them, we'll wire them up depending on the piece of equipment that we have. Our sensors are already mounted, already installed from the factory, and you have to mount a dissipation board. Currently, on some of our equipment, others it's integrated, and we'll see more and more of that integration as we move forward into our systems. Again, how do we make it easier for our installers out in the field?
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that in the production of equipment. The ones that are making those changes, we're doing it transitionally.
Yeah. Yep. Again, we all love change, so try to do it in steps where we can, and
That's
not change
right.
where we don't have to.
Give us our baby steps.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So let's go back to some of our best practices. So now that we're
Mhm.
starting to see, we do have minor changes, right? We are going to see things like red caps in certain places indicating that we have an A2L refrigerant. We are going to see refrigerant leak detection in some applications. We need to simply look at our line set guide for our installation manual or one of the additional instructions to be able to determine if I can reuse the line set. Well, let's make sure that this is going to be a proper system. So let's walk through a few.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the big things that we also hear and get is, well, the size of the service valve is the size that I need to make my line set. Now, I
Oh,
don't know how many people believe that or not, but
yep.
inside of our actual installation instructions or our product data, we'll let you know what's going to happen. So what happens if I have a 3/4 inch service valve? Does that mean I have to put in a 3/4 inch line set on my suction side? Well, not necessarily. Depends on the length of the line. It depends on um, other things too. But what happens if I make it smaller? What happens if I put a 5/8
Right.
inch line in versus a 3/4? Well,
How
if
does
you
it
know
change
your
capacity?
length, you're looking at capacity.
Yeah.
So we give that information in our product data, and I tell a lot of people use the product data, because if I'm looking at, hey, do I have to use a 7/8 or can I use a 5/8 line or a 3/4 versus a 5/8? Well, which one's easier to install?
Yeah. 5/8 all day long.
5/8, right? Instead of maybe that 7/8. And what's my capacity loss? And if it's 1%, what's 1% of 36,000?
Right.
It's a very, very
Absolutely.
small amount. It may not actually impact the install or the comfort, the capacity of the equipment anyway. So pay very, very close attention to that. You don't always have to make it the size of the actual service valve. We used
Sure.
to say bells, but now with press fittings, you're gonna have some different things there with our straight stub outs. But it does not have to necessarily be that size. It depends on the application that we're installing. So piping diameters, I always love to tell people, look at the product data. The long line guidelines, as you mentioned earlier and pulled up. And then also, like I said, our residential air conditioner heat pump using that Puron refrigerant guideline, that application guideline with the service manual is very, very beneficial out there. The other thing is ways to pull proper vacuums.
Ooh.
When we do a lot of our training, we always have units that we'll have sitting around. We'll have attendees, we'll have participants in our classroom go up and show us how they connect their gauges or how they connect a vacuum pump to a system when they're going to pull that evacuation. And what's the number one answer that you typically hear, Clifton?
Well, grab my manifold gauges and let's go do this.
Yeah, they're pulling through their manifold gauges, right?
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that you don't have to pull through your manifold gauges. Actually, the more connections that you have, the more potential restrictions and or leaks that you could have while you're trying to pull that vacuum on a system. So, of course, large diameter hoses, one can suffice. Sometimes you may need two. Going directly to your service valve, your suction service valve, and then doing on the opposite side, hooking up your micron gauge on the liquid side. So you're actually getting that full evacuation through the system.
You bet.
And there's a lot of people that have put it just right on top of where they're pulling the vacuum. And what happens when you go shut the vacuum off? You'll see your micron gauge climb, right? And then as it starts to climb, you're like, I'm going to be here forever. Well, put it on the other side, hook up properly onto that portion, and then let it go. And if you use a large diameter hose directly to your vacuum pump, we've seen that it can actually make you more efficient on the field. And it's been
100%.
proven.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done a few videos. It's been a while since I did one on the smaller vacuum pumps. I did one it's been years ago, but I did a 2 CFM rechargeable vacuum pump with a 15-foot line set on a 3/8, 3/4, and had 250 microns in like 4 minutes. You doing it properly, it can change your speed drastically. Now, when we went from Puron to Puron Advanced, did the evacuation limits change? Were we still at 500 microns expected from the manufacturer?
A minimum of 500 microns.
Sure.
Yeah, minimum. And then, of course, you'll want to do a decay test to make sure that the system is tight. There's no moisture in it. Again, we're doing that dehydration process. So even if you start to see a climb over a decay test or you don't give it enough time on the decay test, that system could still be wet. You could still have some moisture in it. So you want to make sure that you're doing proper decays as well. So again, when we talk about ways of properly cooling that vacuum, large diameter hose, I can tell you that if you try to run through your manifold, because I've done some myself, running through a manifold, running through my gauge set with a 9 CFM vacuum pump, that am I really pulling 9 CFM from my vacuum pump? No, and I can actually get done quicker with a smaller, like you said, a 2 CFM pump or whatever if I have it connected properly to my system.
Yep. So really, when we get down to best practices, it's just reviewing the things that we should have already been doing as standard practices.
Yeah, and written about, like I said, in the 1950s. So there is an actual book out there that you can go research and read from review of that vacuum in 1959.
Wow. Now, Carrier does a lot of training. A lot of our instructors, a lot of our technicians that are here, they're looking for continued education. They come here to our show, which we are so grateful that everybody joins us. Many join us at the National HVACR Education Conference every year in March. what else? What other resources do we have available for additional training from Carrier?
Yeah. So as I mentioned in the opening video that you had played there is mlctraining.com. From there, you can create an account. You can get on to our platform where we actually do have some of what you see here with industry safe applications, safety storage, transportation, the recovery, evacuation, and charging, installation best practices, service best practices, and our overview of actually Puron Advance. That we have different training videos, quick little 30-second, 60-second questions that were asked of us that we had some of our internal team members answer. And we just created a bunch of those videos as resources. Even on our equipment, we have some QR codes that actually lead to that landing page.
Really?
That if a homeowner even wants to see it, they can go ahead and we try to help lower that anxiety, not
Yeah.
only by our field or industry technicians, but also homeowners that have asked similar questions as well. So again, we're huge on how can we help, and we try to put as many of those resources out as possible. But through mlctraining.com, you can absolutely go through there, get some of those free videos, things like that. Also with Nate, training hours, credits, things like that, that people may need those times to account towards their renewing their license or whatever that they have with Nate. We offer that as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I should have looked for those little video shorts. I wasn't aware of those. Those have been ideal to embed into here. I might grab a couple of them, put in the edited version. We'll have to see. You know, a lot of us as instructors, we're looking for some of those video shorts that we can share with students. That gives us a little bit of a feel of what the industry is once we get out into the field. And so those are very handy pieces to have.
Yep.
All right. Last part. And anyone has any questions, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes to get the questions fed in from our social media channels back here into the studio. So if you have any questions, if you have anything you want us to go back over again, throw it in the chat and we'll make sure to get those answered before we end up wrapping up the show. But let's tell everyone a little bit more about this fantastic technical training center you have.
Yeah, so with our training center that we have in Indianapolis, we have 6,000 square feet. 4,000 square feet is on our main level, and that's divided amongst 6 labs. In those 6 labs, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is that we have our ductless and crossover lab, where we have 7, 8 crossover units and about that same amount of indoor units and things like that with our ductless from multi-zone to single zone. We also have our 2-pipe PRF lab, and then we have our 3-pipe PRF lab. So, the difference between the 2-pipe and the 3-pipe, an extra pipe, right? So we can utilize that hot gas bypass down for lower capacity in colder climates. And then we also have our ducted splits that's divided into a few different labs where we touch all kinds of equipment from our new air handlers that we have out there, our variable speed pieces of equipment, our communicating to our connected equipment, hybrids to 80s, 90s, any different combination that we can put together, we try to have together down there. And we're always replacing that. So when you came in, Clifton, a lot of it had been transitioned over to our Puron Advance equipment. But when I first joined Carrier, it was all Puron. Now, we built this training facility in, we added to our furnace factory because it is at our gas furnace factory.
Yeah.
In 2022, and our first class was in 2023. And every year since, we've replaced equipment. So we've just upgraded our 3-pipe lab. We're in the midst of doing our 2-pipe lab as well
really?
over to our Puron Advance equipment. So it's always changing. We're always evolving. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution.
I think that's kind of our theme for the year for training as well, that it's an evolution of education. It's not that we ever take completely different paths on training. We just evolve. Whenever the equipment changes, we evolve. Whenever the refrigerant changes, we evolve. Howard always says, it doesn't matter if the next refrigerant is milk. We just need to learn how to work with milk.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we're going to see more transitions. We're going to see, new refrigerants, and just understanding that the A2L transition wasn't as crazy as everyone anticipated. If you were already doing best practices as your standard practices, probably wasn't a heavy transition for you at all. But we do still get a lot of questions, and most of those were around refrigerant line sizing. And so we appreciate you spending time hanging out with us today. I am going to go ahead and screen share. Yeah, make sure to grab. Oh, good. That's the residential piping and long line set guide. Yeah, thanks for grabbing that there, Todd. I'm also going to do a screen share so that if anyone missed the My Learning Center page we were talking about, I encourage you to go check that out. Let me drop us down here, get a little bit more perspective. So on My Learning Center, you can go in, start your account, and be able to explore all the different course catalogs and content that is available through Carrier.
Yep.
Awesome.
So you have different learning paths there, courses online, and there may be some things that you can see that are in person as well. We had some QR codes up from that as well. So everything from business owners to basics or foundational level trainings. Again, how can we help out the industry? I did see a question that said, what changes with A2L refrigerants on ductless and crossover systems?
Yes.
Change-wise, it's the same as our residential. So anything that follows the UL 207. So I did want to answer that from Todd there as well. So I saw that question.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't see any others coming through. Have some great responses. Everyone enjoyed the show. I'm glad everybody hung out with us, and we really look forward to diving deeper into Carrier products along the way. There's a lot of things we can chat about. So for anyone that's joining us, if you have some specifics you would like to learn more about any of the Carrier product lines, we need to dive into some technologies, let us know. I'll start knocking on the door, see if I can't bribe Jeff or one of the other crew to come on board and dive a little bit deeper. And we are grateful that everybody joined us today. And we hope to see you again next week, which is going to be a really interesting one next week. Professor Silberstein and Jason Abjud are going to join me. We're going to talk about corn sweating, which, Jeff, you and I know all about corn sweat here in the Midwest. Most people don't know. If you're not from corn country, you don't know what we're talking about, how humid it gets here, but we're actually going to start diving into the psychrometrics of corn sweating and what it is to the air around us. I think it'd be a fantastic show. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely my pleasure, and I do look forward to next week's as well.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
Absolutely.
Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you all next week on Did You Know? The ESCO HVAC Show. Bye, everybody.